I'm going to start off with it's a story that is not my own, so don't think like, wow, he made that up. And you'll know because a lot of you have probably heard the story yourselves, but I felt like it fit perfectly with where we're headed today. So here goes. There's two vessels out at sea, and they look on the radar and they realize that they're going to intersect at some point. So the first guy gets on the horn. He's like, "Hey, you need to move 10 degrees to the north, otherwise we're going to collide. So can you do that?" And the voice comes back and says, "Negative. Uh, you need to move 10 degrees to the south. Uh, Obviously, you are going to collide with us." And the voice comes back a little bit further and he's like, a little bit frustrated, a little bit more angry, a little bit more upset. "No, you don't understand. I'm the captain of the ship. You need to move 10 degrees to the north." And the other guy comes back, is like, "Well, this is Seaman second class. And no, you need to move and change course." They're going back and forth, back and forth. It's elevating, elevating, elevating. Finally, the captain says, "Not only am I the captain, this is a U.S. battleship. Change your course." And the voice comes back there and he says, "This is a lighthouse. Your call." So, this morning, we are talking about pride versus humility. That's where we're headed, right? Because often I think pride is one of those things that works its way into us and into our mindset, into our ideology, and how we see the world, and we don't even recognize it until it's too late, until we're fighting with with a lighthouse, right? That's something that we all have a tendency to do. So there's a big conversation. I think throughout the series, this is just one of several that we've done. This is, I think, part 4. Each of us has like hundreds, if not thousands, maybe even more of these tensions internally that we struggle with, we wrestle with on a regular basis. Am I going to move in this direction? Am I going to move in that direction? Which way am I going to go? Now, the important part about all these series, this whole series that we're talking about, is if we don't call it what it is, if we don't look at it in the face and we don't recognize and acknowledge that tension that we hold and we're struggling with, if we don't look at it in the face, often we don't make a clear decision to move in the direction that we want to head in. So this is the underlying kind of theme. This is a truth that we say around here all the time, but it is your direction, not your intention, that determines your destination. So our goal throughout this series is that we would have a clear conversation about some of these tensions so that we can not just intend to move in a direction, but we can actually move in that direction and take steps so that we can end up the type of person that we want to end up as. Pride is a weird word when you think about it, because there's multiple different connotations. There's different, pride in some contexts could actually be a good thing. We want to have self-confidence. We want to be have pride in ourselves. That's a good thing. We also don't want to have an inflated ego that's also known as being prideful. So it's like prideful versus pride, but then you also throw in like false humility in there also, just to mess things up again, like convolute it all. If you don't know what false humility is, that's where you pretend to be humble or you project your humility, but really underneath all of that is actual pride. So you're like, look at how humble I am. That's false humility. So I know that this is nuanced. It's a big conversation. It can be confusing. We're going to try to go through it, though, together. And the reason why I wanted to go through this specific talk is because I think it's more than just like being prideful or not. That there's something attached to this decision. The big idea here is that one of these decisions, one of these directions will move you towards healthy relationships, actually building up your relationships, strengthening your relationships, and also moving you in the direction of Jesus, like becoming more like him. The other will move you away from healthy relationships. It'll actually undermine your relationships. It'll destroy them. It'll also move you in the opposite direction of what Jesus is like. And I know some of you in this room might be like wrestling with the whole idea and premise of faith as a whole. And in Jesus, you're like, you don't really have a problem with Jesus, but you're not sure about this whole church thing and faith thing, and I get that. But just like I said, you don't really have a problem with Jesus. Because basically almost nobody in the history of the world has ever really had a problem with Jesus. They have a bunch of problems with people that call themselves Christians and try to follow him, but they don't really have a problem with Jesus because regardless of what you believe about him, what we know about him is that he was a rabbi, he did really amazing things, and that people loved him and he loved people. It's like, that's not something that you don't want to be like. So even if you're on, this whole side of the spectrum of your journey of faith, and you're like, I'm not sure about all this, it's still a good thing to move in the direction of Jesus. Like that's what I'm trying to say. So this is a big talk because one of you moves you in that direction, the other one moves you away from that direction. So we're going to go through, kind of talk a little bit about what humility is, what pride is, and then find some scripture to discuss in the midst of all that. So humility isn't a lack of confidence. I know that often when we think of someone that's humble, we're like, oh, they're just like soft-spoken. They're just not as loud as everybody else. They're a little bit weak. Like we think that humility is akin to being weak and soft. And that's not true at all. Humility isn't a lack of confidence. We'll get into that more this morning. Pride is an overconfidence. Like pride is in and of itself an overconfidence in who you are. And again, like I want you to have pride in your work. I want you to have pride in who you are. But I don't want your ego to get out of balance. I don't want your ego to be inflated and out of balance. Human nature doesn't draw us in the direction of humility. It moves us in the direction of pride. So this is one of those circumstances, one of those things that we struggle with, that if we just try to do nothing, we're just like, it'll take care of itself. You will be moving in the direction, the current will pull you in the direction of pride, not humility. Humility is something that you have to work on, something that you have to not just intend to do, but put your steps in that direction, move in that direction. And the reason I know that this is true of our human nature, because everybody wants to be right. Nobody wants to be wrong. And in fact, everybody thinks that they're right. Nobody has an opinion and thinks, well, my opinion is wrong, but I'm like, that's my opinion, so it's wrong. No, you have an opinion because you think that it is correct. Now think about this. We have these moments in life where we have strong feelings, we have an opinion about something, could be political, could be any type of thing, could be morality, could be anything. We have a strong opinion about something, and we find someone in this world, shock and awe, that has a different perspective than us, right? And we get into a heated debate. Have you been in this situation before? And you start to say, well, this is why I'm right. And they start to present like, no, this is why you're wrong and I'm right. And you go back and forth, back and forth. At some point in that conversation, someone, either you or that person, is going to say something, and it completely destroys your entire logic. You're like, oh, that's really good. Like that was, okay, that made more sense than what I'm trying to say. And you know this internally. And here is the moment that you recognize if you're acting in pride or humility. Because a prideful person is going to keep on fighting. In that moment, they're like, internally, you're like, I know I'm wrong. Outwardly, you're like, but I'm right. And you fire right back. A humble person in that moment is going to say, well, hold on. What you just said makes a lot of sense. I haven't seen it. I haven't thought of it in that way before. I don't know. I might be wrong on this. I might be wrong. Like that's a humble person to be able to admit that, to be able to present that in the midst of an argument, right? So this is marriage 101, right? That's what this is all about. We'll just talk, not even like the other half of my marriage. This is just me. We're just talking about me. It's like, no, I'm right. Even if I know I'm wrong, I'm like, I'm right. For the rest of the night, I'm still right. I'm right. And it's, everybody knows. Everybody knows. So here's where pride comes from, I think. Often our prideful behavior is a projection of our own insecurity. We know that we're wrong, or we feel like we're weak, but we project strength even though we're recognizing weakness in ourselves. Pride is a projection of strength because one feels weak internally. So we counteract that. We decide we're gonna show them, we're gonna make sure that everybody thinks that we're strong, even though we feel like we're weak. Humility, on the other hand, is not a projection. Humility is not a projection. It is strength in confidence that you know who you are, and that confidence allows you to honor others when a prideful person is not able to honor others in that way. I know that we live in a world that tells us all kinds of things, and I'm not going to try to bash the world, but one of the things, and this might even be something that you've been a champion of, so if you want to have words with me later, that's fine. But the world will tell you that you need to fake it till you make it, right? Even if you don't feel that strong, even if you don't have that confidence, you just pretend that you do until it actually feels real. And the problem that I have with that, and I know some of you are like, no, that's been my pattern and it's worked out. The problem that I have with that is now we have a world full of people that are just fakers. Like they're just pretending to be someone that they're not. They're not accurately seeing themselves. They're pretending they're pushing that away, rather than working on themselves to get to a different level, a different place in life. They're just pretending that they're there. And I don't think that's beneficial. I don't think it's beneficial to relationships. I don't think it's beneficial in the long run to you. So having confidence in yourself is different than having unfounded confidence in yourself. Right? Recognizing where you're at, being self-aware, that allows you to move in the direction of that confidence, but not pride. Right? Pride is overshooting. It's like, here's where we need to be, and you're just like, woo, way over the top. We think the projection of pride will open doors. In all actuality, pride handcuffs us. Like it slows us down. Pride doesn't allow me to do some things. Pride doesn't allow me to be empathetic. In my relationships, pride withholds my empathy. It doesn't allow me to go around the table to their side and see from their perspective. Because pride demands, no, you're right, they're wrong, don't even look over there. That's what pride does within you. You know, it also doesn't allow you to be a learner. Because lo and behold, you know it. You're like, you've never taken the class. You've never had the conversation with the expert. And you're like, yeah, but I got it. No, I don't need to read a book. I got it. I fully understand the whole concept. I got it. Right? Pride doesn't allow you to become a learner. It doesn't allow you to humble yourself to the point where you're like, there's some things that I don't know. I should learn. I should listen to somebody else other than just my own opinion at some point. So pride it's blinding. It's denying. Honestly, it's enslaving. It demands that you behave in such a way because you have this projection to uphold. When I was growing up, there was a series of videos. This is how old I am. It was all VHS. It was not on TV. And I don't even know if it was like my parents, my cousins. Somehow these videos found their way to our house. And I watched them. I loved them. It's called McGee and Me. And these were like, they were the best. I don't remember them. Like I remember parts of them, but I don't really remember them. I know that they made an imprint on me, though, an impact on me, because when I was thinking about being prideful versus being humble and thinking of illustrations, I went back to a specific episode, don't even know what happened in the episode, but I remember the scripture that was used. So apparently it was effective. Like I don't even know about like what happened, but I remember the scripture, and that's what we're going to talk about today, the specific story that happens in the Bible. Just to kind of set this up, this is on a Sabbath, so today is a Sabbath, that's Sunday, and Jesus is with his disciples, but he's also eating dinner at the house of a Pharisee. Now, normally we think of Jesus eating house at the house of sinners. He still is today. It's a joke, it's fine. So Pharisees are teachers of the law. They thought that they were perfect. They tried to live perfect. They tried to do everything absolutely right according to the law. So Jesus is at the house of this Pharisee. He's having this meal, right? So he's having this meal with him. He's sitting around. There's a bunch of people there. Everybody wants, their piece of Jesus, essentially, to be there with him. And he sees this man that is, like, he's having some type of physical ailment. And he looks at the man, and I like to pretend, like in my brain when I'm replaying this, I don't even think that he made eye contact with the man very much. I think he more just made eye contact with the Pharisees. Like, are you all watching? Are you watching what I'm going to do? Because here it comes. Boom! And he heals him. Like, I don't know if that's the sound effect that goes with Jesus healing people, but for our intents and purposes today, boom, that's it. So Jesus heals this man, but he's looking at the Pharisees. Because the Pharisees are very clear. Healing somebody, this is ridiculous. Healing someone on the Sabbath is included in the work category. So Jesus wasn't allowed to provide a miracle to heal someone. I mean, it's ridiculous. These religious laws have gotten in the way of Jesus loving someone in need in this moment. And Jesus steps around the religious law, looks at the religious leaders in the face. He's like, are you watching? You watching? Boom. What are you going to do about it? Right? I mean, it's very in their face. And they don't respond really. Normally they do. Normally they fight back. But in this moment, they don't. They continue on like, okay, we have a whole night planned out. We don't want to ruin it here. We knew this was going to be a tense moment at some point. We're just going to move on, not even going to address it. So this is where we're going to pick up in Luke chapter 14, verse 7. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. Now, a parable is a story that Jesus makes up in order to prove a point, in order to illustrate something, a truth to the crowd around him. Now, the fun thing about this parable, usually he uses parables that are like very different from the situation, and he's just like this completely off the wall idea that doesn't look anything like what they're talking about, and all of a sudden he like brings it all together and they're like, oh, that's amazing. This one is basically just ripped from the page of like their current moment, what they're doing. He continues on, he says, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, so a bunch of people in a room together eating a meal, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. Now, hold on. So, the wedding feast, let's get into this a little bit. A wedding feast, obviously, bridegroom and a groom, or bridegroom and a bride, excuse me, and everybody's celebrating the wedding. Now, there's multiple times in Scripture that it actually describes the church as the bride and Jesus as the bridegroom. So this is like not too far off of that. There's probably like a little bit of a like, are you guys picking up what I'm putting down? Like, you understand what I'm saying here? Like, are you with me here? There's going to be a day where we all get together and we celebrate what we've done. We celebrate what's going to happen, right? And in this moment, everybody here to celebrate gets a seat at the table. But, you're going to look for a spot. Do not take the place of honor. For a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. So continuing on, next verse. If so, the host who invited both of you, very aware of everybody in the room, right? And anytime there's a parable, there's always a God figure. Just a heads up, the host is the God figure in this moment, like God the Father. So if the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat, then humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. So there's big crowd. Everybody's there. We're all celebrating, right? This big, huge moment. We've been waiting for this moment. The time has finally come. You try to take a seat that's elevated, and the host comes and is like, oh, I hate to do this, but you're in someone else's seat. And you have to stand up in the middle in front of everybody else and walk to the end of the table. And everybody's watched this. Everybody knows what's going on. That's humiliation. That doesn't feel great. He continues on in verse 10. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. He says, rather than taking the elevated, like the best spot that you can find, like, musical chairs, like, oh, which chair's the best? No, just find a chair that nobody else. Like, go to the corner, right? This is the humbles. Go to the corner of the table. You know the chair or the table that has like the leg that goes right between the chair, like your seat, the legs of your chair. The most uncomfortable. You got people on either side. You're like, I just have this little slice to try to eat my meal with. That's all I've got to eat here. And you're like, everybody else's elbows out, and you're like, trying to be real skinny real quick. Like, go take that spot. And the host, God the Father, will see you and will elevate you, will place you somewhere better. And in so doing, you will be honored in this moment. Now, verse 11. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Exalted that's not a word that we use today. Essentially, it means to elevate. It means to elevate. So, if you try to elevate yourself beyond where you belong, you will be humbled. Eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually you will find yourself in a position where you are humbled. And that doesn't feel good. Rather, what he says is take on this mindset, have this mentality of humbling yourself, lowering yourself. Be less, care less about where you're sitting, and just be glad that you're there. Just do what you can in this moment. And God will come along, and eventually he will elevate you himself. So here's a big question. There's a really big question. Who are you trying to elevate? In your life, in your world, in your relationships, at your work, when you're frustrated, when you have a bad day, when you're walking through life, who are you trying to elevate? Is it somebody else? Is it you? Is it God? Like, who in your life are you trying to elevate? Humility is, it's trusting your self-worth to God. It's allowing this moment, this value piece that we see ourselves as. It's allowing God to inform us of that spot, of that title, of that self-worth, rather than us trying to demand it. Right? Because pride goes around, it's an unending task. You have to convince everybody in every single room that you're in that you're up here. You've got to project every single time, all the time, to every relationship. You've got to make sure that everybody else knows how great you are. And internally, you're like, I'm not really that great, but I need to make sure everybody else thinks I'm that great because I got to fake it till I make it, right? Here's the amazing thing. God's view of you doesn't change. God's view of you doesn't change from yesterday to today. He's seen you the same from the day that you were born. Why? Because He formed you in your mother's womb. He knew every ounce of potential that He placed in you. He knows your intellect. He knows your strengths. He knows your weaknesses. He knows all of it. And His perspective, His opinion, how He sees you, how He looks at you, has not and will not change. He sees you perfectly. We walk around in this broken world and we're like, well, how do you see me? How do I see me? We look through broken lenses. God sees you in a perfect, absolute perfect lens, complete. He sees you better than anyone. He sees you better than you see yourself. He sees you better than your mama sees you, than your spouse sees you, than your boss sees you. He sees you better and more clear than anybody else. He sees you perfectly, completely. And He loves you. We're like, I don't know if I want to be seen perfectly and complete. And He loves you in that perspective. And when we start to wrestle with this, right, we start to try to earn that position. When we understand, like, God sees me that way. God has given me forgiveness for for what I've done. God has extended grace and mercy to me. We try to earn it. We try to earn it back. Well, if God did that for me, then, well, I've got to make sure that I'm good enough. I've got to earn that. Stop earning. You earning will not change God's perspective of you. It's the same. You just need to work on your relationship with Him. You just need to work on becoming more like Him. You need to work on moving in the direction, following Jesus. That's what He's invited you to do. To be a co-heir with Christ. Those are the words the Apostle Paul says. Co-heir with Christ. That we are adopted into this family. Now, when you don't have to prove yourself to everybody else, when you don't have to make sure and project and do all this, when you don't have to, you don't have to fight for it any longer. You can walk into a room and just be you. Because you know that not a single person in that room, their perspective is going to change God's perspective. Who you are. You don't even have to defend yourself anymore. Like we have this chip, some of us have a chip on our shoulder every single time that someone says something that's contrary to how we see ourselves or how we think of ourselves. We feel like we have to fight that battle. You don't have to do that anymore because God's voice is so much bigger. You can rest in peace, in confidence that God loves you. It's like, well, that person doesn't. That's fine. God still does. God still does, and His voice, His perspective is worth way more, infinitely more than any other voice in our life. Now, there's a real-life example of pride, because I think pride has a way of really affecting our vision. And so I'm going to tell you a story. This is a true story, by the way, but I'm going to add a twist at the end because it makes it a better illustration. And I'll let you know which that is. This story is about my parents' honeymoon. So, voila. It's pretty exciting. My parents didn't have a whole lot when they got married. And so for their honeymoon, they went camping. They borrowed my grandparents' trailer and their canoe, and they went to this lake called Diamond Lake in Oregon. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or been there. It's beautiful. It's great. They go to Diamond Lake, and they're having a wonderful time. And they're out on the canoe, and my dad is fishing, and my mom thinks it's really, romantic. She's out in the bow of the canoe, I don't know, Anna Green Gables or something. And she's just missing the parasol? Is that what it is? Whatever, the umbrella. So she's sitting there, and she thinks for whatever reason that it's a good idea to write all of her thank you notes for the wedding while on the canoe. Now, my mom, she's young. She knew that her mom told her you have to write a thank you note to everybody. So she's got her list of everybody written out, and she's writing these thank you notes in the middle of the lake. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's great, right? Dad's fishing. Uh, in the midst of that moment, the wind starts to kick up a little bit. And my dad's like, no, that's fine. It does that out here every once in a while. And then it kicks up a little bit more. Now it moves from like the wind kicking up to now we're in a full on, like, it's starting to storm on them, get stormy. Like it's turning into whitecaps. So they're like scrambling. Dad's trying to paddle as hard as he can to get back to the dock. And they're like in the middle of the lake. It's a pretty big lake. Mom's trying to hold on to all of her notes and everything. And the list at some point like blows out into the middle of the lake, never to be seen again. So if you were at my parents' wedding and never got a thank you note, that's why. So they finally get to the dock, right? Dad's like paddling as hard as he can. Finally gets to the dock. They get to the dock, and the dock's doing like this number, like up and down with all the waves. He gets my mom out of the canoe safely. He's trying to like hold on to the canoe, make sure it doesn't like capsize and go under, and get out at the same time. And lo and behold, the dock like rises right when he's out of balance, and it like pushes him, and he has this split-second decision to make whether I'm going to fight for this, which never goes well, or if I'm just going to like let it happen and dive in. So he dove in. He dives in to the lake in the middle of the storm. My dad, if you don't know this about me, I am nearly blind. I have horrible eyesight. I get it from my dad. He has awful eyesight as well. He's wearing glasses. He comes up from the dive, like just refreshing. He comes up without glasses. And my mom's like, what did you do with your glasses? My dad's like, that's not the right question. That's not the right way to say that right now. So he's blind as a bat. And they load up the canoe. They're like, we got to go back home now. Like, we got to get out of here. They connect the trailer. But now what happens? There's a truck, a trailer. My mom's never pulled a trailer ever in her life. My dad, who has plenty of times, can't see anything. So this is their solution. My dad drives, and my mom tells my dad when he's getting too far to the left or the right. And they survived. Like they made it. And they're still married today, 48 years later. This is amazing. Okay, so I tell all that story for this one single illustration. Pride is the overconfidence in yourself, that when you can't see clearly, you convince yourself and everybody else, no, I got it. Pride would be my dad telling my mom, nope, you sit over there, keep on working on your thank you cards. I've got this. I'm going to go at it my way. I trust my eyesight more than I trust yours. Right? That's what pride does. It screams, I know what's best for me. And not only that, it doesn't stop there. It goes on to, I know what's best for you too. It projects it. I know what's best for me. I know what's best for you. I'm not going to listen to anybody else. My vision is the best. My voice is the best. I'm trusting me. It's all about me. And when that mentality has been solidified, when it like cements itself into your mindset, you start to do these things. You start to demand, I deserve this to those around you. You start to tell everybody else, this is happening. I don't deserve that. I don't deserve that. You shouldn't be doing that to me. You shouldn't talk to me that way. You shouldn't say that. We start to demand. Another word for this is entitlement. We become entitled because we see the world very specifically that we are owed something. We deserve something. We've elevated ourselves well beyond the accuracy, the place that we actually are, our own self-worth. Now, when you look at our world today, like you look around the world, you read the news, you see what's going on in the world. How has this played out? How has pride played out? How is our world, how is your world, how is your daily life affected by pride? Even if you're not moving in the direction of pride, there's plenty of other people out there that are, right? Pride affects us all. And I don't know if this is true, but it feels like entitlement is on the rise. This is a movement, whether people know it or not. It's like, all right, get on the entitlement campaign. Like, let's just do it. Everybody needs to do something for me because you know how great I am. You never know me. You've never met me. We've not interacted at all. But I can tell you I'm pretty great, so you should do this for me. That's entitlement. There's more and more people, it seems like, that are moving in that direction. Pride elevates your voice over others. And to the point that you start fighting about whose voice is louder and better. And we see this, right? Social media, just in the news, whatever. We see that sides are just fighting back and forth. They're just screaming bullhorns back and forth at each other, not listening to anything at all. They're just trying to be louder than the other side. That's pride. That's pride. Pride leads to greed. We talked about greed a couple weeks ago. Real good. If you haven't listened to it, you should online. But greed, this is kind of my mindset with this. Greed is the fruit on the pride tree, and the roots are insecurity. Greed is the fruit on the pride tree. Like you have this tree that's pride, it's full of pride. The fruit of that tree is greed. It's all about me. What can I get? What do I deserve? How do I get more? It's all about me, me, me. Elevating yourself. And the root of all of that is our own insecurity. It's our own insecurity. Because we don't trust God or anybody else to get us what we think we are owed and what we deserve. And we don't see ourselves even that good either. We need to project it. Pride is, I came up with this definition, so you can argue with me about it later. Pride is proactively elevating yourself for the attention and affirmation you desire. Not that you deserve, but that you desire. It is making the decision that in every situation and circumstance, I'm going to elevate myself in order that I get the attention and the affirmation that I so want. Today is the beginning of the NFL, right? This is the opening weekend for the NFL, which I've been waiting forever. I'm so excited about it. Love sports, love football. It's a great, great afternoon watch. One of my favorite things to do is catch the post-game interviews with really good quarterbacks. So a really good quarterback, and they go through training, but some of them are just skilled at this. A really good quarterback in an interview, the interviewer is going to set up the quarterback, and they're going to be like, that was amazing, that play that you did. You're so incredible, blah, blah, blah. Like, pour on, like, everything. They're just like, you're the best. And a really great quarterback is going to take that moment and reflect all of those compliments back to his team and his coaches. Well, you know, I wouldn't have even been in that position had the coaches not put us in the right position. My defense did such a great job of holding them where they were at in order to put us in that opportunity. My offensive line didn't allow, they held the defensive line so that I didn't even get touched. It was easy for me to make it a simple play when I have teammates like that. The wide receiver studied so hard, you don't even know the work ethic that he had this offseason in order to be able to make that move. Like, this is what a really great quarterback does. It's amazing to watch. And when you catch it, like, wow. They're just reflecting and deflecting all of the compliments that they could just accept on their own. All the praise, they're like, yeah, I'm pretty great. I know. I set another record. I know, it's awesome. I'm amazing. Really, that's what they're getting. But they don't do that. They reflect over and over. They make sure that everybody else around them feels that they're being elevated rather than the one person that actually has the spotlight on them, right? So if you can think about that, just kind of have that mindset. The next time you get into a tense moment and you recognize, I know it's hard to recognize, but if you recognize, like, this is that thing, this is that moment that Pastor was talking about, that I tend to elevate myself, my voice, my opinion, my perspective in this situation, and you can start to feel that pride kind of creep up. Here's the question that I want you to ask. What would a humble person do in this moment? What would a humble person do in this circumstance? I know we've talked a lot this morning about what pride is and how bad and horrible it is, being prideful. But humility is incredible. And especially when you can stop and step back from the circumstance, let the temperature kind of die down in the room a little bit, and think, in this moment, what would a humble person do? What would they say? How would they respond? Like I said, we've talked about pride a lot, but here's the humility piece. Humility isn't quiet, and it's not weak. It is strength. What's so great about humility? This is what's great about humility. We see ourselves and others accurately. Humility allows that lens to be taken, that pride lens to be removed, in order to see ourselves and others accurately. Not only that, we see God's involvement rather than absence. So much of the time in our life, we feel like we have to demand and create and force things into place. When if we step back from that, and we can trust God in those moments, we start to actually see, God gave me my intellect. God provided that opportunity that I never would have had on my own. God did this in this moment. God did that in that. We start to recognize the hand of God that is active, proactive, that is in our lives, working in and around and through us. With pride, we can't see that. With pride, all we think is, I'm so great, I'm so smart, I worked hard for that, I was the one that did that. When we step back from that, we allow humility to move in and remove that lens, we can actually see God at work rather than being absent. Not only that, our value shifts from what we've accomplished to who we are. Because pride is all about what we've done, the awards, the accolades, the titles, what we get. Humility is about who we are. And when we have that solidified because of what God says, we don't have to be loud. We don't have to be obnoxious. We can sit back in peace in the midst of chaos and recognize my value is unchanged in this moment, even in the midst of this chaos. Because God in heaven, that knows me better than anybody, says that I'm valuable, that I am worth. That I'm worth so much that He sent His Son to die on the cross for me. You want to know what something is worth? You got to look what somebody is willing to pay for it. And for every single individual in this room, God decided that you are worth Him sending His Son to the cross for you. That's what you're worth. That allows you to kind of take a step back from that pride lens and be like, okay, I can be humble. I can move in the direction of humility. Prideful people can't follow. I mean, they might try for a little bit, but eventually they're going to be like, hold on, just get out of the way. I got this better. They speed back by you on the road. You're like, I thought I was going to be the leader of the caravan. And they're like, yeah, see you later when we get there. They just pass you right on by. A prideful person can't follow very well. And when we talk about following Jesus, that's included in that statement. Humility allows us to follow, to submit ourselves. Okay, I'm going to take myself down a notch because I know I cannot compete with Jesus in my life. Jesus has to be at the top. If I'm going to follow Him, that has to be my first step. I'm going to move in that direction before any other filter is added, before any other question is added. I'm going to move in that direction first and foremost. Now, the first step in following Jesus, or we talk about this, there's like the moment, you're like, I need to say the sinner's prayer, if you even know it. It's like, I need to somehow introduce myself to God. Okay, He knows who you are, but this is important. Like that first step of, okay, Jesus, I'm going to trust you with me. I'm deciding that I'm going to follow you, that I'm going to prioritize you over me, that I'm going to accept your forgiveness for my sins, my mistakes. I believe that you died on the cross and rose from the grave, that you've conquered sin and death. And I'm going to accept that grace, that mercy, that forgiveness that you extend to me. That's like the first step, right? But the first step, it's like intersected, it's impacted, it's derailed as a whole by pride. Because that first step is all about humbling ourselves, recognizing I am not the one in control any longer. God, I give you control. God, I'm gonna lay everything in my life down, including myself and my ego. You are first and foremost. That's what it takes. That's what it requires. Humility. So, as we close up here, I do have some discussion questions because I don't want you to just come and sit in this room and have a good time and be like, yeah, we sing some songs, I heard some stuff, pride and humility, I think is what we talked about, and then move along with your day, like go watch the Seahawks and then be like, whew, great day, and then forget about everything tomorrow. I want you to continue this conversation. So whether in your family, in your group, or maybe just you driving around town and like remember these questions and start to dialogue about this. So the first discussion question is, if you're honest, which, I mean, we're in church, so whatever. If you're honest, what do you believe you are owed in this life? What do you deserve? It's not a fun question to write down, but maybe that's what it requires. Maybe you need to write it down and be like, if I'm honest, this is what I think I deserve and I'm owed in this life. Next question. Who are you elevating? How are you doing that? Who are you elevating and how are you doing? Are you elevating yourself? Are you elevating somebody else? Are you elevating God? Like, who are you elevating and how are you doing that? And then finally, How has pride impacted your faith? How has it impacted it? How has it made a difference? How has it made it harder? Here's the thing. Humility will develop your faith. Pride will derail it. Pride will derail it. So that's why this is a big discussion this morning, conversation this morning. Because if you want to move in the direction of Jesus, that is the direction of humility. To move away from that is to move in the direction of being prideful. And it will damage relationships. It will destroy relationships. And you'll be isolated and alone with people that have a false sense of who you actually are. So, choice is up to you. I think it's pretty clear which direction that you should choose, but that's up to you. And not just an intention, but a step in a direction over and over again. Let me pray. We'll wrap up this morning. Dear Heavenly Father, you are good. You are good regardless of our circumstance, regardless of what we're up against, regardless of what we face, regardless of how frustrated we are at work, or the anger that we feel, or the sadness that we feel in those relationships, or the lack of confidence that we actually feel, even though we project overconfidence. God, you know us, you care about us, you love us. Lord, I pray that you would help us get to a place where we can just try it out. We can just lean into you a little bit and just see what trusting you feels like in our life. And I thank you that you are trustworthy. More than anything else that we will ever experience, you are trustworthy. Not to give us what we want, but you are trustworthy to never leave us nor forsake us. That your love is always available to us. That we will never have done anything too wrong for you to bring us back in and embrace us and love us again. So God, whatever we're wrestling with, whatever we think has gotten in the way of us and you, pray that we'd see it for what it is. That your love is bigger. That you are bigger. And I pray that we would trust you with everything. In your name I pray this morning.